I'm Matt Johnston, firefighter and mental health clinician. Today I'd like to introduce you to my guest, Dr. Ross Laird. Dr. Laird is an author, he is also an academic and a university professor. We speak a lot today about the restorative nature of healing and how we can overcome obstacles in our life despite anything that life tends to throw at us. I'm actually in Tynehead Park, an area that he talks about in our conversation today, including the Douglas fir tree. So enjoy the interview. Hi everyone, and thank you for tuning in today. My guest today is Dr. Ross Laird. Not only is Ross a great mind and a literary leader in the concept of creativity and counseling psychology, but I'm very honored to also call Ross my friend. And Ross is actually from the Lower Mainland and has done a number of work in the field of addictions and creative writing. And I believe that Ross has a lot of really good words of inspiration and a unique perspective that can shed light on understanding what the COVID pandemic means for emergency workers and our loved ones. So Ross, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Matt, for having me. It's an honor and a privilege to be here.
Thank you. What a strange time we find ourselves in.
Yeah, it's unusual, perhaps almost unique, and people are really grappling with ways to navigate through in a period of great uncertainty. Right?
Mm-hmm.
There aren't a lot of clear signposts right now about how to think about and make meaning of this current experience. It's a tough time.
It is a tough time. And I think for frontline emergency workers, there's an added stress too of not only having this tremendous uncertainty, but also this acute exposure to kind of this invisible stressor in some ways. To me, it kind of challenges our traditional idea of what a traumatic experience is or what it could possibly be.
Well, yeah, and when it comes to first line workers and first responders and social workers and people who work with vulnerable populations of all kinds, we're used to separating these two things out. We're used to saying, okay, we'll work with the vulnerability of the clients, or we'll work with this critical incident, or we'll respond as a first responder, and we'll help those people in need. And then on the side of that, we'll do our own work to stay connected to one another, or to do self-care or professional development, or whatever we need to do in our own private lives that helps us to be able to do the work that we do. And we're used to treating those as two separate projects, essentially. What's happened now is that they've become one project. They've become blended together because not only are first responders working with the vulnerable populations and with people in emergent situations, they're also working on themselves because they're inside the situation as well. They're also going through the same things that the people they're working with are going through. So it's a different kind of situation. It's a fusion of these psychological challenges. We're all struggling with the same issues, and that's kind of new.
And also just the acute experience this has for frontline workers. And I'm thinking of the term hypervigilance of, typically being able to find ways to decompress, like going to the gym or the park, or finding ways to spend time with your family by going to a movie. And a lot of those things are obviously restricted. So I'm kind of curious what your perspective is on frontline self-care when we're really just kind of getting through day to day with a lot of this uncertainty.
And I wonder about the kinds of things we're seeing now with regard to self-care for first responders and people in the general population as well. What kinds of things people should be doing. And I'm sure you're seeing, and I'm seeing a lot of stuff online about trying to fill your day, trying to keep yourself busy and do healthy things, And I think that's fine. I don't object to that, but I also think that there's a way in which this becomes another stressor, right? This becomes another thing that we should be doing, another thing that we're not doing enough of, and it could potentially add to the stress that people are feeling. I think about this experience as a kind of a call in a way. When we think about traditional cultural storytelling and meaning making, we always think about stories in which there's a call, in which there's an invitation, voluntary or otherwise, to enter into some kind of experience of growth and change. And this experience is a kind of call for us, I think. The call is often a negative or challenging experience. It's often a trauma. And here we are being called to live our lives in slightly different ways at the moment, to find opportunities to connect with ourselves and with other people in different kinds of ways than we're used to. And there's a tendency, I think, to try to mm, resist a little bit that call, to try to normalize everything, to try to just keep going in the same old routines, although their context might be different. Working out at home instead of working out at the gym. And like I said, I think those things are fine, but there's also a bit of a risk there in losing the moment where we might think about what other options we have, moments where we might consider connecting with people in different ways, or trying out different ways to connect with ourselves, moments of reflection or stillness or simple openness to whatever's happening around us. And I think the society we live in doesn't give us a lot of encouragement to do that. Our society is really focused on moving forward, getting stuff done, being busy. And we're in this situation now of enforced non-busyness for reasons that are really unpleasant. But the enforced non-busyness is its own kind of opportunity to find meaning in this experience, to think about our values and our purpose and all kinds of really deep questions that we don't get a chance to grapple with very much at all in our modern society.
So if you were to put on your clinician hat right now, and we're looking at just the level of intensity this experience has for frontline workers, as you're tasked with working with individuals and organizations, is it hard to identify meaning when you're in this hypervigilant state of mind?
Well, it's almost impossible. I mean, any kind of stress that we experience causes us to go into our habitual stress response. And for many of us, that's either a kind of dissociation or a kind of freezing or a kind of avoidance. And then that hypervigilance you mentioned is kind of the nervous system's way of keying up or keying into those moments and just staying on all the time. And it's an effective coping mechanism in the moment. It works. It gets you through, because over the lifetime, each person develops a particular style of responding to stress. And we know from our personal experience instinctively that our style of coping gets us through. It might lead to other kinds of consequences, but it allows us to survive, which is what the body wants, essentially. So we're going to go into this default stress response, all of us, in this situation, which is a stressful situation. And when we do that, when we get locked into the response pattern that we typically enact when we get stressed out, we'll just keep doing the same things again and again and again, whether they're healthy or not. And as you know, some of the consequences that arise for first-line workers, especially, involves the fact that you can get locked into your stress response in such a habituated way that you can't get out of it ever. And that leads to the mental health challenges and the problems with addiction and depression and those kinds of mental health crises that can be the end result of a long period of just being locked into a certain kind of pattern that you can't break.
And I guess what we're really talking about is survival versus thriving. When we look at kind of moving beyond this habitual closed loop of traumatic thinking that's so easy for us to fall into, because like you say, it's like our everyday habitual routine. Do you have any pointers in terms of how we can unlock and entice a different way of looking at the world when we're in the midst of this COVID pandemic?
Well, I do, but like with most things related to personal development, the things that I think of are not easy to do. Like I said, we live in this society where we're constantly busy and we're constantly trying to avoid a little bit what's going on in the inner life. And we're very distracted most of the time, and we're moving forward with patterns of behavior that we're quite used to. And most of us don't slow down very much.
No.
Because when we slow down, what happens is all the stuff we've been running from comes out, right? All the stuff that we don't really want to face just comes tumbling out, and we have to grapple with it. And that's really hard. And we don't live in a culture where that's really encouraged. You see it more with men than with women, but there's often with both genders, with all genders, there's a kind of cultural imperative to be resilient and be strong and be able to get through things. And underneath that, many people are feeling very vulnerable all the time. And people have real world issues that are sources of significant suffering in their lives all the time. People have family members who are struggling with mental health and addictions problems. People have elderly parents or vulnerable children or whatever it is. People have a lot going on, and if they slow down enough to notice the momentum of all that stuff, it can be difficult. It can be difficult to face up to the amount of stuff we have going on that we haven't really dealt with. And so in a situation like this, where there's kind of an enforced slowdown, where you might have opportunities to face or um, um, explore the meaning of some of these underlying patterns in our lives, it might be really difficult to do that because we're not used to slowing down. We're not used to taking time to reflect and really interrogate ourselves about the meaning of stuff that's going on. So if we take this from a kind of trauma spin and put a positive psychology spin on it, we would say that this is a moment where we have the opportunity to do some self-discovery, where we have the opportunity to open ourselves to new kinds of experiences. And for that, the pathway is very straightforward, which is just slowing down, taking time, and being open.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of going in the backyard to work out, going in the backyard to sit and just look around, look at the trees and listen to the birds and take 10 minutes to have what some people might call a mindful moment, or a moment of self-regulation, or a moment of rebalancing, where we're not thinking of anything. We don't have any particular goal. We're not trying to achieve anything. We're not trying to meet our expectations of how we get through things. We're not trying to be more resilient. We're just trying to be present. Just trying to be present to the moment of experience that's happening right now. And that's hard for everybody to do. But it's really the only path toward personal development. Nothing else really works. We're kind of built this way. The nervous system is either in these coping styles like hypervigilance or fight or flight response and kind of keeping us busy and keeping us alive, or it's in this place of stillness, recalibrating, readjusting, rebalancing. And in the best of times in modern society, we don't have a lot of opportunity to get to that rebalancing place. So in this particular situation we're in right now, where we might have some more of that kind of opportunity, our tendency is to do things like binge watch Netflix. And I completely understand the impulse behind that. It feels good in the moment. It gives us that little tickle of satisfaction that we get, that we feel like everything's okay, that the narratives we're encountering have a meaning and we can follow them through to the end and everything is resolved and wrapped up. And in a TV show we might binge watch, for example. And we need that. We do need that right now. And I don't think we should get too judgy with ourselves about things like binge watching. But at the same time, there might be opportunities here for other kinds of possibilities that basically don't happen when life is taking place as normal. This is unique. And so if we flip it, as I said, to a positive approach, it would be, are there moments where we could take a few minutes just to be with ourselves without trying to achieve anything or without having a particular kind of goal? And you could call that a kind of meditation if you want, but it's really just an experience of being present.